start with hello.
Bethel here.
No. Okay. Since the start of the second Trump administration, there have been many reactions, in particular to his immigration policies. Some rejoice in hopes that our faulty immigration system will be fixed, while others worry that we are not just closing our borders, but our ideals. Regardless of a person's political perspective on the topic, migrant experiences have never been easy. People who uproot themselves and enter a new culture experience many challenges, especially if they are not fluent in the dominant language. In the majority of cases, they choose this out of the desire for a better life, better opportunities, or education. Although there are some exceptions, most people in this situation will embrace the culture of the country they enter. Our country strives to be multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multilingual as a place of refuge from persecution and discrimination. But in practice, our society and government frequently fails to live up to such expectations. I see this divide between the goals of our country and their application as paralleling a similar divide as described by Victor Hugo in his novel Les Miserables. His critique of 19th century France led me to consider the oppressions in American society through the lens of the themes he paints. Les Miserables holds this dichotomy between the unjust laws of society and love and mercy in society, while Hugo asserts the dignity of all people and calls the readers to help rewrite the systems of social inequality. Rooted in the principle of inherent human rights, all people, regardless of citizenship status or national origin, should be treated with equity and justice. Around the world, we see news of violence, shootings, and assault. Justice is more than punishment for wrongdoers, though. The word comes from the Latin justitia, righteousness or equity. Thus, full justice requires changing the systems of inequality which create injustice. Through the past decade, the United States has seen unprecedented polarization, with not just the political realm separating, but the population being slowly pulled apart. However, there are some values and liberties which the vast majority of Americans can still agree on. Access to a good education, access to well-paying jobs, physical and mental well-being, freedom of self-expression, and most importantly, the worth of human life. Yet, though we share these values, there are many ways which we try to implement them, and they far too often prioritize the wealthy or secure. The US prides itself as being a place that safeguards the rights of life, liberty, and happiness. But does it? One group often sidelined or shunned is immigrants. One collaboration of researchers studying COVID-induced xenophobia found that immigrants in countries with more openness to migration tend to experience less xenophobic discrimination than in countries with less openness. While migration is hard physically and psychologically on those moving, and is an adjustment, and at times can feel threatening for those already living in the country, they found that it improves empathy, understanding, and cultural exchanges. Some other people will oppose immigration by citing the lack of resources. In his article entitled Lifeboat Ethics, The Case Against Helping the Poor, Garrett Hardin argues that to create true equality, we would need to redistribute all wealth in a socialist manner. However, he argues that this is impossible. For if we let everyone on this metaphorical boat of wealth, the boat swamps, everyone drowns. Complete justice, complete catastrophe. While he brings up a good point, I agree, abrupt or rapid immigration would put the economy and support services in turmoil. I find his perspective to be an exacerbation of reality. He comes from a viewpoint of scarcity and limited resources. But the Food and Drug Administration estimates the US wastes 30 to 40% of its food supply. Furthermore, with this mindset, we turn to a self-centered, wealth-based, individualistic society, which we already have. And do we really want that? Others will critique the refugee and asylum policies, claiming that they are fraudulent, and call for the implementation of a points-based merit system like Canada and Australia use. Currently, for those without connection to the US, we use a diversity visa lottery, which randomly grants permanent residence, green cards, to up to 50,000 applicants per year. The DV helps people from lower income and less emigrated from countries to come to the US, thus increasing the pool of global talent. Applicants must have at least a high school level education or equivalent, a valid passport, and pass background checks. Once winners are randomly selected, they must pass security clearances and interviews. Because of all these steps, there is a very low likelihood of fraud. Points-based systems, on the other hand, rank applicants based on their usefulness to the economy, based off of language, adaptability, and education. Both systems have shortcomings. For instance, the process takes 2 to 5 years and is very expensive, especially for people from low-income places. However, to rank humans based on advancement, economic benefit, or capital easily becomes discriminatory. The diversity visa, on the other hand, promotes the values of justice, refuge from tyrannical governments, and openness towards foreigners, which we proclaim in the Declaration of Independence. There are also those who call for stricter border policies, popularized by Trump's Build a Wall slogan. Various methods, including detention centers, offshore processing, and increased deportations are used. While I agree, illegal immigration is a problem, with thousands of undocumented immigrants entering daily, I do not believe that the solution is to just cast them off. In fact, this can do more harm than good. Australia adopted a very strict detention policy on all asylum seekers attempting to enter the country without a visa. Migrants are deported to several centers in the Pacific and held there, in some cases, for years. These centers are infamous for rampant physical and sexual abuse, overcrowding, mental and physical health deterioration, and this most affects the women and children in these facilities. Australia uses incarceration as a deterrence method, similar to the way that some Americans call for. But throughout history, these methods lead to an us versus them mentality, of fear of the other. In the US, this has already happened. We pushed indigenous peoples off their ancestral lands. During World War II, we forced thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps. And now we detain immigrants. Subjecting vulnerable persons to a problematic, already bloated prison system is not going to solve the problem of undocumented immigration. Furthermore, the first 13 amendments of the US Constitution apply to all persons living in the US, not just citizens. But many non-English speakers do not know their rights and are exploited by both ICE officers and our judicial system. There are valid concerns about immigration, but while stricter border policies may deter illegal migrants, is the cost of human rights worth it? With this in mind, how can the US update its immigration policies and practices with consideration for justice, mercy, and equity? One way is through aiding recent migrants' integration into society. One study in China on domestic migration found that access to community and psychological support helped migrants integrate economically and find social acceptance in their new home. With the challenges of moving, governmental and social support significantly aid the process. If the US had a better system for acculturation, it could improve understanding and mutual respect between native-borns and immigrants. Another method for improvement is the immigration process itself. Both Republican and Democrat supporters agree that our current system is long, expensive, and laborious for applicants. To cut down on people attempting to enter the country undocumented, we need to simplify and shorten the application process while still retaining the necessary background checks and precautions. I uphold the right of a country to keep its borders safe and protect its citizens. But I believe that this can be achieved in a manner which also upholds the rights of an individual person. Although the citizens of the United States of America represent a multitude of beliefs, perspectives, and backgrounds, which state their political convictions, we hold some truths to be self-evident. Thus, before we consider citizenship status or national origin, the first consideration should be for the person. In all policies, in all practices, in all interactions, I call for empathy and understanding, which stems in our shared reality as humans. If this is not our priority, we fall into the tyranny and oppression which we set out to escape. Thank you.